Uh, hey everybody, welcome back to the Afro Elite. I'm just gonna wait while I send some of these links out and I'm doing this because, like I'm kind of shadow banned a little bit, so nobody's getting my links whatsoever. Nobody's getting my links at all. So this is what I have to do. I have to like individually send out a bunch of links to people, which slows me up a little bit, small bit, but it's really nothing. We're still gonna get to it, and as this is, we can wait as people come in too, as we send in all the links out, because I'm sure they haven't gotten them yet, but we're sending all these out, making sure everybody got their links. Okay, so Happy New Year to everybody. This is the first video of 2022, so I want to say a Happy New Year to all of you all. I hope you all were safe. I hope you all are still safe now. Hope you all had a fun time indoors where it was safe. And if you were out, I hope you had a fun time out, but I hope you were safe, you know, while you're outside. Damn, come on, let me send this link out. Okay. And I'm doing this because everybody's asking me to send them links out, so I send it out to my Instagram and my Twitter at J_Elite10. I do that. Let me see. I send it out. Okay. So, waiting. Okay. Shout out to everybody in the room so far. Shout out to everybody who's liked so far. If we can please, as you're coming in, if you can like as you're coming in, and you can share that, those things are very appreciated, because it helps people find the channel. It helps people discover the channel. The channel actually does well as far as people liking the content, people engaging with the content, but the thing is, people can't find the content. That's really the biggest issue that we've had with the channel so far. Is the content is kind of being hidden by YouTube. Hey, what's good, brother? How are you? Happy New Year to you. Get to see you. We got a lot of work to do. This is gonna be a very loaded topic. What? Okay, lost my train of thought. Anyway. So people aren't seeing it. It's not the fact that because people have criticized, oh, your channel hasn't grown because you keep talking about racism and nobody wants to hear about that, and you keep talking about slavery and nobody wants to hear about that. That's not the reason why. There are other platforms, and this isn't to throw anything against those platforms, but there are other platforms that talk about the same subjects I talk about that do better than this channel does, because more people are aware of those channels, and they're not aware of this channel. Okay, and I'm not trying to say anything about the quality of their content, because they, you know, the new black media, of course, makes high quality content, but they've been around for a longer period of time, so more people are aware of those channels. So, you know, they have a foundation built, and that's the problem with this, because YouTube stopped sending out notifications. YouTube will copyright me for literally anything, even beats. And I've told you, there was a beat that I made, the intro beat, when the timer goes, the countdown, I made that beat. There's other beats that I've made that I've gotten copyright strikes for, beats that I've made myself personally. So, you know, YouTube is hating on me, but it's okay, because when we're here and when we're liking and when we're sharing and you know, spreading the word, then the channel can grow bit by bit. Okay, I'm not necessarily even too much worried about it. Okay, because the purpose of the channel is being fulfilled. Okay, which is to educate. Shout out to everybody here. It says, get no notifications, saw it on your only saw you online because you were on IG story. Exactly, which is why I have to, every time I go live, I have to do something on Instagram and Twitter. I have to post something on Instagram and Twitter, because a lot of people aren't getting my notifications. It makes you wonder who's filing the copyright complaint. That's a good question. That completely blew my mind, that I got a copyright strike off of beats I made. And as soon as I told YouTube, no, I made this beat, you can literally not find this beat anywhere else on any other channel or any other platform prior to the day you found it here. If somebody took my beat, then they took my beat, but you found it on my channel first. You didn't find it anywhere before here. This is where it originated from, and they took it off. So, you know, that's what it is. But on tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about, because a lot of people are talking about crime, and a lot of people are talking about, you know, the crime spike that's going on. And I'm gonna make this is gonna be like part 1 to a series, because it's a very loaded topic. But we're just going to talk about prisons in general and the history of prisons in general, so we can have an understanding of why America has the most people incarcerated in the world. The United States of America has more people incarcerated than all of these communist countries that they say oppress people, but America has more people locked up behind bars. Okay, so we're going to discuss that. So, without any further ado, shout out to everybody in the chat. Let me pull this up. Let me pull this thing up. I want to get rid of the ads real quick first, because I don't want too many ads popping up, because you guys already know how I feel about that. There's going to be a lot of reading in this, so bear with me. Here we go. Here we go, y'all. We move to the side so you guys can see my face. All right. Now, some of this stuff is not very well relevant, but a lot of the stuff is relevant. And then we're going to read some more articles. So I'm going to kind of be fast with this. Okay. Zoom in. History of the U.S. prison system. Statistics on the U.S. prison system paint a sobering picture of incarceration and the country's criminal justice system at large. As of 2020, nearly 2.3 million people across the country were behind bars, according to the Prison Policy Initiative. More than half of those people who were locked up were held at one of 1,833 state prisons. Okay, most people who are locked up behind state prisons. That's a fact. Okay, so you know. The rest can be found at one of 3,134 local jails, 110 federal prisons, and 80 Indian county jails. When they say Indian, they mean Native American. Okay, 218 immigration detention centers and other facilities. Okay. The country's staggering rate of incarceration, 698 per 100,000 residents, is higher than any other country per the Prison Policy Initiative. How did we get to this point? Now we're right here, y'all. Right here. Let me see. The resulting timeline will take you through an opening of some of the most notorious prisons across the country, like Alcatraz and the Eastern State Penitentiary. So, you know, I gotta like really zoom in close so I can see it. Okay. It also points out major legislation that increased the number of people, the average length of time behind bars, and led to widespread disparities among the incarceration of people of color. People of color, y'all. Remember, people, we know it really means black. They're saying people of color, and we're going to get to the people of color being behind bars thing too. We're going to get to that later on, okay? Okay, nonviolent drug, we're right here, nonviolent drug offenses. Finally, we point out important reform milestones, such as when the U.S. had the lowest approval of death penalty. Okay, the emancipation of key rehabilitation programs and attention from the U.S. Justice Department of the unconstitutionality of bail. Okay. So we're going to just skip down. Now this is going to go through 50 major moments in like the criminal justice system, as far as the prisons and stuff like that, and as far as the prisons and the prison laws. From this all the way goes from 1790 to 2020. Okay, so we're going to start here. Now, so you know, most of this is about black people, even though they're not going to say that, but most of it is. There's some key points in here. I was going to just give you the statistics, but there are some key points in here that I want you guys to actually see. So you know I'm not making it up. I want you guys to actually see it. Okay, we start right here. 1790, the first penitentiary opens in Philadelphia. The first U.S. penitentiary opens in Philadelphia. Okay. When Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia was expanded in 1790 as part of an effort to relieve crowded conditions, it became the country's first penitentiary. According to the law library, it had an intentional designed environment that, while safer and more sanitary than other prisons, confined inmates to their cells for more than the for more than their entire sentence, with little human contact. The goal was to give the incarcerated people time to reflect on their behavior, sans distraction. Okay, so what that means is, if you were sent to jail for like 20 years, 30 years, you did pretty much all of the time. You did the whole 30 years, you did the whole thing, and you weren't around other inmates. You weren't around like other guards. You weren't around other people. You didn't have people coming to visit you. Okay, this was in 1790. Okay, you pretty much that was solitary confinement. Okay, now as we go down, this is 1829. Eastern State Penitentiary becomes the first modern prison. Philadelphia, now we're back in Philadelphia again. Philadelphia becomes home of the first modern prison in 1829. The Eastern State Penitentiary opens. It tortured the practice of solitary confinement as a way to give inmates time to reflect on their crimes and eventually emerge reformed. The penitentiary would later be famous as the place where Al Capone was incarcerated. Okay. Now some of the stuff is kind of relevant. Some of the stuff is very relevant. Now I'm going to highlight the stuff that's very relevant. Okay. Now black people were still enslaved during this time. U.S. bans debtors' prisons. Okay, the federal government abolished debtors' prisons, where people were previously being incarcerated for inability to make good on their debts in 1833. So that means some people, if like you had a loan somewhere, if you owed somebody something, you owed some money to some business or something, if you had a debt that you couldn't pay off, you would be sent to jail. Okay. In 1833, the federal government abolished that. Okay, we don't have to read through all of this. I'm going to kind of try to go as fast as I can, just point out relevant information. Okay, we're right here. 1835, nation's first women's prisons open. Women's prison open. Okay, so the country got its first women's prison, and Mount Pleasant female prison opened in New York. Okay, so this was in New York. Okay, now it says the prison will be shut down 30 years later. Speeding through. Convict leasing. This is important. This is in 1866. This was 1 year after black people were supposed to be free. Okay, in 1865. Convict leasing. Convict leasing becomes widespread. When the Civil War ended in 1865, convict leasing became widespread in southern states. The system allowed prisoners to lease out incarcerated people mostly black men, to private businesses for a fee. According to PBS, the system helped enrich states and businesses while treating the convict laborers dismally. Dismally. I think that's how that word is pronounced. So convict leasing is pretty much you're a convict and you're getting some like a business or an ex slave owner can lease you. They can go to the prisons and they can say, I need these many people to work on my plantation, because they got their plantations back, but because they didn't have the slaves, they didn't have the free labor after the Civil War, then they would have to go lease them. They would have to lease them from the prisons. And black people also were being locked. Now this is the time when black laws came. All of this is relevant because black people were getting locked up. We were getting, black men specifically, black men were getting locked up what they called black laws. I think the first black laws was in South Carolina. I know it was in South Carolina, I believe in Mississippi as well, where you would have to sign a contract. A black man would have to sign a contract stating that he pretty much worked for a white business or a white man, like plantation owner or something like that. He would have to have evidence on him that he had an employment to work for that. If he didn't, he was subject to fines and prison time. So there were specific laws that were designed for black men to go to jail. So black men were going to jail for pretty much anything at all. Black men were going to prison for. And then when they were in that prison, you had ex-plantation owners, or not ex, but they were currently plantation owners. You had ex-slave owners who would just be able to go to the prison and say, okay, well, I need them 50 slaves for this season while my crops are growing, so I'm going to give you this money, and then they're going to come with me. And that's pretty much slavery, okay? Because in the 13th Amendment, which was the amendment that abolished slavery, it had a clause in there, there's a loophole in there, that a lot of people, neither the Republicans nor the Democrats ever address, no matter how many Democratic, liberal presidents or politicians you have, or Republicans that say they don't like slavery. They never address the clause in the 13th Amendment which says if you're a prisoner, you technically are a slave. Slavery is abolished with the exception of crime and punishment. So if you're convicted of a crime, you technically lose the rights of a citizen. Okay? So with all of these things add up. All of these things were going on at the same time. So black people, a lot of black people who, because we were denied the 40 acres and mule, there were black people who had to share crop. So they had to pretty much work on the plantation. They had to do heavy labor on the plantation. At least to a certain extent, they were getting benefit that they weren't getting back when they were actually legally property of the slave owner. And then you had other black people who were pretty much forced to work for white people. Damn near all of the black people who were quote-unquote free after the Emancipation Proclamation and after the Civil War pretty much had to go back to work for white people. A lot of them did. Okay? And with convict leasing, a lot of black people were under the same, if not worse, arguably worse conditions that we were during the actual time of slavery. During the actual time where you were legally the property of the slave master. Okay? Okay, so this was in 1866. It became widespread, especially in the southern states. Because that's where like the biggest plantations were. Okay? Okay. In 1871, Virginia court deemed prisoners slaves of the state. Okay? In 1871, man, I should have worked on this. Ruffin v. Commonwealth the Virginia Supreme Court ruled that inmates were quote slaves of the state who had forfeited nearly all personal rights. So any rights, now black people at that time, this is 1871, black people didn't even really have rights. We didn't have rights that were upheld. But Virginia, if you were a prisoner and you pretty much became a prisoner, if you were just standing around, you can get locked up. If you looked at a white person, you can get locked up. If a white person, despite having no evidence whatsoever, if a white person said you did something, you would get locked up. If you were out past a certain time, you had a curfew. As a black person, you had a curfew. If you were drinking out of, if you went to a white establishment, if you do anything at all you did, pretty much existing was a crime, and you could get locked up at that time. And then, according to Virginia in 1867, you were technically considered a slave. So you can show this to all the people who's like, well, slavery ended after Emancipation Proclamation. Technically, even on like the federal sense, on paper it did, but even according to the states, it really even didn't. There was still legally, the Supreme Court of Virginia legally deemed black people, black men, as slaves in 1870 and 1871. Okay, so now we're right here. It allowed the criminal justice system to deny basic constitutional rights to prisoners for nearly a century, according to process. Okay, nearly a century. Okay, now we're going down. 1891, government established federal prison system. In 1891, Congress passed the Three Prison Act, which created federal prison system. It allowed the first 3 federal prisons to open: USP Lentworth, USP McNeil Island, and USP Atlanta, under oversight of the Department of oversight from the Department of Justice. Okay, a shout out to everybody here. Shout out to everybody who's leaving a like. I appreciate that. You guys share, I would appreciate that as well. But as we continue, now we're in the 90s. 1907, New York established the first parole system. Okay, in 1907, New York adopted the first comprehensive parole program. Okay, the first state in the country to do so, according to Hall. I believe this is how this name is pronounced, Hall or Hale. Okay, the program included modern components of parole, such as intermediate sentencing. Intermediate sentencing means if you do a crime, there is a range of how long you can go to prison for that crime. So if you were to like rob somebody's house, or if you were to rob somebody, if you were to, depending on the crime and the circumstances, there is a range where you can go to prison for. Okay, with intermediate sentences, you see a big disproportionate, racially disproportionate amount of sentencing time between white people and black people, specifically white males and black males. You see black males oftentimes getting a much longer prison sentencing than white males will for the same crime. No priors, all that, everything being the same, you'll see the black males going to prison for a much longer sentence than the white males will stay in prison for a much longer period of time than the white males. Okay. Okay. Now, as we're going down, last state outlawed convict leasing was in 1928. Alabama became the last state in the nation to outlaw the practice of convict leasing in 1928, which means all the way up until 1928, from 1866 to 1928, Alabama had it to where you can by a prisoner, and that prisoner would have to come and work for you. Okay. Chain gangs, or groups of incarcerated people who are chained together to do hard labor work for punishment, would soon emerge, according to Versa Institute of Justice. If you guys know those cartoons, if you guys would like see those cartoons where you would have prisoners wearing like black and white stripes, and you would have the hats, and they would be they would be chained, their legs would be chained to other prisoners, or it would be chained to a heavy like anchor, a heavy metal ball, so the prisoner's mobility would be restricted. Let me get this ad off of here for this. Let me get that ad off there. That was an actual thing that happened. You can, I don't know if they have it in like the modern day cartoons, but that was actually something that happened. Let me see if this picture, this is actually, let me zoom them in a little bit so you guys can have a better look. This was a part of Convict Leasing. Now they're back pretty much on the plantation. They're in the black and white. This stuff is real. This stuff really happened. This stuff is not just the cartoons. This stuff really happened. Okay, and this wasn't centuries and centuries ago. This ended in 1928. That's less than 100 years ago. These men were chained to each other, so you pretty much couldn't run away if you're chained to 50 men. If you're chained to 50 men, it's hard to escape being chained to 50 men and then being chained to an anchor. You pretty much couldn't escape. And if all 50 men did decide to make a run for it, it's super easy to catch you. Okay, let me zoom back out so I can read. Okay. Okay. In 1930, Congress creates I cannot pronounce my words properly tonight. Bureau of Prisons. While federal prisons had, let me take some water. Hold on. I cannot pronounce my words properly. Excuse me. Okay. While federal prisons have been around for more than 3 decades, the Federal Bureau of Prisons wasn't established until 1930. It would become responsible for managing and regulating all federal correctional institutions to, quote, provide more progressive and humane care for federal inmates. It was also responsible for ensuring consistency in providing centralized administration for these facilities. Okay. It still has that to this day. Let me see. I'm reading some of your comments right here real quick. Let me bring it in closer. Let me see. If y'all ever saw Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, yeah, Life from Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence. That was that stuff. That now it was a movie, but a lot of that stuff, most of that stuff, was based off of things that would actually happen during that movie. That was actually the truth. Dylan, that's a good point you brought up. Some of those movies, you might think, okay, some of that stuff was exaggerated. A lot of that stuff actually wasn't exaggerated. A lot of that stuff actually was the case in a lot of situations. Okay. In 1934, Alcatraz prison opens in San Francisco Bay. The Federal Bureau of Prisons opened a now notorious high-security prison on Alcatraz Island in the San Francisco Bay in 1934, designed to be a prison systems prison. Okay, Alcatraz was intended to hold inmates who were deemed to be too violent, dangerous, or escape risks. Okay, so this is like the most notorious, or one of the most notorious at the time, very high security prison of prisons. Okay. So the lockdown was for real in Alcatraz. This was in San Francisco. Okay, in 1934. Okay, and also in 1934, Congress established Prison Work Skills Corporation. On June 23rd, 1934, Congress established Federal Prison Institute. The Federal Prison Institute. The government-owned corporations. The government-owned corporations dedicated to helping inmates gain work skills. The move. Where am I? The move was effort to help people successfully transition from prison back to society and avoid committing future crimes. Okay. So this was to establish. Now this was in federal prisons. This was to give people, because, like, for instance, right? If you're convicted of a felony, you go to jail for 15 years, 20 years, okay, 25 years. Let's say you're 25 at the time. You go to jail for 15 years, okay? You get out of prison when you're 40 years old. At that time, you don't have any work experience for the whole 15 years. You really can't. You don't have any skills, so it's super hard for you to do anything when you get out of prison. So a lot of that time, this is what we call the I think it was recidivity rate or recidivity rate, I believe. This is when you are convicted of a crime, you're locked up for a certain amount of time. Now you really don't. Nobody wants to hire you coming out of prison. Nobody wants to hire you. You've been gone for this amount of time. You don't really have any skills. You have a stigma because you're a convicted felony. You're a convicted felon. You have a stigma against you. You don't have any skills. So your ability to make money is very, very low. So for instance, if you are robbing stores to get money before and you go to prison for 10 years and now you can't get a job, you still have to eat. You still have to, if you have a family, you still have to provide for your family. Even yourself, you still have to eat. You still have to clothe yourself. So the likelihood that you would re-offend is high. That's what you call the recidivity rate. Okay, the likelihood that you would re-offend, you would do the crime again after coming out of prison. Okay, Taya, how you doing? How you doing, sister? Now, we're going to go down. Okay. This is a 1940 Bureau of modernized practices. Bureau of Prisons modernized practices. Between the founding of 1930 and the subsequent decades, the Bureau of Prisons nearly doubled the number of inmates and institutions under its purview. It then worked to modernize its practice in 1940, establishing inmates classified and security levels at different institutions. Okay. These concepts are still used by the Bureau today. So that means, okay, depending on what type of crime, like for instance, you murder somebody versus somebody who murdered 12 people, okay, they would put them on like different levels. Like, let's say you were in a fight or something like that and you kill somebody on accident, you still go to prison. That's still murder, but that's not the same as somebody who is some serial killer who would kill people because he liked killing people. They would put that in like different security levels and stuff like that. That's what that would mean. Okay, that still goes on today. Okay, now this is 1940s. This wasn't that long ago. This was less than 100 years ago, family. Okay. Prisons in the North adapted correctional institute model. Okay. The new type of prison reform came about in the 1940s. In 1940, with northern states adopting the quote correctional institutional model. This type of correction aimed to reduce the physical and psychological pain of prisons by offering vocational training, recreational, and visitation privileges, Okay, vocational training pretty much means training on skills, career skills that can get you someplace, like a chef, or like an some type of like plumbing, or some type of like mechanical work, like working on cars or something like that. That's what that means. We're right here, and therapeutic programming. However, these programs were only provided to people considered capable of reform, which rarely included people of color. Now, when they say people of color, in the 1940s, pretty much the only people of color were black people. Now, that during that time, there weren't a lot of what you would consider people of color here. Okay, even the Hispanics, the Mexicans, Hispanics, they were considered white until the 1970s. They were considered white in the sense until the 1970s. So the people of color is really black people. Now the term people of color is anybody who's really not white. Anybody who's, even white people would consider themselves people of color under certain circumstances. Anyone who's not like British white is, quote, a people of color. So, but back then in the 1940s, people of color pretty much really only apply to black people. Okay, so don't let articles or statistics from the 1940s saying people of color make you confused into thinking that it was anybody but black people. Okay, so all of these programs of you learning skills and you going to therapy and you doing you getting visitation privileges and all that stuff in the 1940s, they were pretty much only relegated to white people. They were pretty much only relegated to them. Black people were denied that. Okay. So this also, so let me not skip past too fast. This also would increase the recidivisty rate, the recidivisty rate. I keep saying recidivisty rate, between black men, because if you, first off, you were getting thrown in jail for literally anything at all. Even back in the 1940s, you were getting thrown in prison for anything at all, and then you would spend damn near your entire sentence. Okay, now remember with what's that one term? Not convict leasing. Not convict leasing. What's that name? What hold on, let me scroll back up. I just forgot the term. I literally just forgot the term. What is that term? It's the term where you have a range between it's on the tip of my tongue. It's on the tip of my tongue. Tip of my tongue. Let me see. Comprehension. Where is it? It was right up here. It's on the tip of my tongue, and I want to be correct when I say this. Let me see. Okay, first, modern prison. I'm trying to speed read. It's a term. That term you use for like the range of prison, where they can give you a range. Let me see. Where that term. Oh, intermediate sentencing. Okay, back to where we were. Intermediate sentencing. See, right here. Now, with intermediate sentencing, you would have black people. Let's say they claim you stole something, right? With intermediate sentencing, they would throw the book at black. They still have that today. That's still a modern day thing. It still exists today in 2022. But with intermediate sentencing, especially back then, you would have black people going to jail for sentencing, being sentenced far longer than their white counterparts. And then, even still, you would have programs and things like that trying to help white people rehabilitate themselves and reform themselves, because they would actually do the crime. Reform themselves so when they came back out in society, they wouldn't have a high likelihood of going back to prison for the same crime. They wouldn't do that for the black men, though. Okay, that's important. Okay. Attorney General bans convict leasing. This was in 1941. It was a widespread thing in 1866, and it ended in 1941. Okay. Attorney General Francis Battle issued he issued a thing. Okay, he pretty much he abolished it. Okay, all in 1941. Let's speed through. Okay, all states implemented the parole system. Every state in the country, as well as the federal government, adapted the parole system by 1942. It would raise the number of prisoners released through parole, hitting a high of 35 years later. Okay, when nearly three-quarters of inmates were released early on parole, according to Du Hall. Right now, with parole, you would have certain. So in case you didn't. With parole, you have certain rules and regulations you have to follow while you're on that parole. Otherwise, you violate the terms of your parole and you will be sent back to prison and you would have to finish the rest of your prison sentence. Okay? Now, let's say you committed a crime. You were convicted of a crime. And you were up. Let's say you had, for instance, 10 years. Within for instance, I know Texas specifically, within about 4 to 5 years, really, of your sentence, you could be up for parole, and you can get parole, and you would have to follow certain rules. So let's say if you had a child, you would have to keep paying your child support. And this is just something off the top of my head. You would have to keep paying your child support. And if you were missing payments on your child support, you could go back to prison. Or you would have to keep, let's say if you had a drug problem, you would have to go to rehab, or you would have to go to anger management, or you would have to go somewhere. There would be some type of rules. And if you violate those rules, then you would go back to prison. Okay, that's parole. But I'm sure a lot of you knew that. Now, we're gonna skip through some of this stuff because we have some stuff I really want to get into. Okay, in 1946, the Battle of Alcatraz, 5 people died. Okay, a handful of inmates in Alcatraz Penitentiary staged a violent escape on May 1946, known as the Battle of Alcatraz. The unsuccessful escape ended in the death of 3 inmates and 2 correctional officers. Not really relevant to the topic, so I'm gonna skip down. I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna kind of speed up a little bit. Okay. This is in 1964. President Johnson signed Criminal Justice Act. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Criminal Justice Act into law on August 20th, 1964. It advanced the right to counsel in federal courts by providing hourly wages and expenses. Hold on. Jeez, man. Expenses to lawyers appointed to the court. Okay, what this means is, you know how you watch a cop show and they say, okay, you're under arrest. They read you the rights, right? And they'll say you have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. So you do have state attorneys and local attorneys who, if you can't afford your own attorney, you do have somebody who will defend you for free. A lot of times these state attorneys don't get paid anything at all. So they do a very poor job. They do a terrible job. They pretty much throw the case. Not necessarily throwing the case, but they don't really put their best their best work into it, because you're not paying them. They're not getting their money from you. Okay. So with this, they're saying this increases the hourly wages of lawyers, according to the report. Okay, that's great. they would still have a whole bunch of black people take the plea bargain, though. Don't forget that. Okay. The Prisoner Rehabilitation Act in 1965. Prisoner Rehabilitation Act led to a major changes in federal correction work. It offered 4 longs work release programs and supported from community community. What is? Let me see. Zoom in. What's that word say? Reinstall treatment centers to people incarcerated in federal prisons. Now we're going to, okay, the death penalty, America did a poll in the 1960s to determine if the citizens approved or disapproved of the death penalty. It dropped to a record low in 1960, from 47 people saying yes to the death penalty, just nationwide in general, and 42% saying they oppose the death penalty. Okay. Now, you know what? I should have plugged the war on drugs in here. In 1971, President Nixon declares the war on drugs. I did a video on the war on drugs and the crack epidemic. I'm actually going to put that in the link below later on when I get a chance. Thanks for all of the likes. I appreciate the shares. I appreciate everybody in the chat room. Okay? Now, I'm going to speed up a little bit so we can get to some other stuff. President Nixon paved the path for the zero-tolerance drug policy in the 1980s, of the 1980s, when he announced the, quote, war on drugs, which was really, and was found out later, somebody outed President Nixon saying that war on drugs was really purposefully targeted to black people. It was a war on black people, but they can't say, oh, we're going to do a war on black people. We're going to have a war on drugs. And then we're going to make, and I said this in the video, so I'm going to plug this in so you guys can come back and watch that video later if you guys have not seen that video. But we can't say we're going after black people, this is a war on black people. So what we'll say is this is a war on drugs, and then we'll make black people, the black community, synonymous with drugs. So when we oppress them and abuse them and throw them in jail for crimes they didn't commit and mistreat them and deny them resources, we'll say, oh, well, this is about the drugs. This is about drugs, drugs, drugs. We're going to ignore the dominant society. We're going to ignore all the white folks that's doing drugs. But because we, in the public eye, have made drugs synonymous with the black community. Okay? Okay, violations of drug laws would lead to a number of people being incarcerated for non-violent drug law offenses to skyrocket for more than 400,000 from 1997, from just 100 from 50,000 from 1980. Okay. So that means in 17 years, from 1980 to 1997, that's 17 years. It went from nonviolent drug offenses, the incarceration from nonviolent drug offenses went from 50,000 to 400,000. That is 8 times. That is 8 in 17 years. Nonviolent drug offenses went 8 times higher. It skyrocketed 8 times, okay, in 17 years due to President Nixon's war on drugs in 1971. Okay, so we're going to skip through here. Okay, now we're in 1973. Okay, the U.S. entered a sustained period of rising incarceration rates between 1973. The rate of U.S. residents behind bars would quadruple from 161 out of 100,000 in 1972 to 767 per 100,000 in 2007, according to growth of incarceration in the United States. Okay. Now we're going to skip down to something. Let me see. Is that relevant? Now we're going to skip down to a little something. Oh, Let me see. Supermax prison in 1980. Now I want to say this. Supermax prison in 1983. Supermax prison era begins. The inmates at the U.S. Penitentiary near Marion, Illinois, murdered 2 correctional officers in 1983, resulting in a permanent lockdown that would confine prisoners to a small cell for all of 90 minutes per day. So that means they were everybody was pretty much locked down in solitary confinement. The lockdown would become a model for the new Supermax facilities in the years to come. Interesting fact about this case in 1983 is that the prison inmates who murdered the correctional officers were white supremacists. They were a part of the Aryan Brotherhood, okay, which is the white supremacist gang. That's why I didn't skip past that. I thought that was an interesting thing. They didn't say that, but that was the case. Okay. Now, something coming down here. Congress in 1988, Congress created stricter sentencing for drug possession. Now we're right here. Congress established a mandatory minimum sentencing for 5 years in prison for anyone convicted of possessing 5 grams of crack cocaine. The policy would have a long-term negative effect on the black community, leading to a greater racial disparity and groups of people behind bars. Now, I really wish I can, in the description, I will put this in right after this video, but in the description, I will plug in the crack epidemic video that I made, because I set this in that too. Now, in Professor Black Truth, I spoke on this as well. Now, in 1988, the Congress created the stricter drug thing for crack cocaine, but powdered cocaine, which is still cocaine, even though they were talking about, they created this narrative that crack cocaine, it's more addictive, it's more harmful, that's more this, that's more that, just so they can put a stigma, because black people were using crack cocaine and white people were using powder cocaine. So there became 101 disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, which means that, as this states, for 5 grams of crack cocaine, you would go to jail for 5 years for 5 grams of crack cocaine. But you would need 500 grams of powdered cocaine to go to jail for 5 years. So literally what that means, in 1988, which was not that long ago, that literally means a white person would have to be found with 100 times more cocaine than a black person would to go to jail for the same amount of time. 100 times more. Okay, that's important to know. Okay, now we're going to skate through. In 1990s, federal prison population skyrockets. Through the 1990s, the inmate population of federal correctional facilities more than doubled amid increased efforts to crack down on drugs and undocumented immigration. By the end of 1999, the Federal Bureau of Prison would have around 136,000 inmates under its purview. All right, purview. Okay. Now, question. I'm gonna read this, and I want you guys to guess who was the one who was in charge of this. Who was the one who spearheaded this? In 1994, federal government built its first. No, hold on. Not this one. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Now, we're going right here. And the crime bill increased funds. Okay. Who is the one who you think? This is Bill Clinton. People were saying the first black president. Because I guess he played some type of musical instrument or whatever. Black people love Bill Clinton for some reason. It was a major part of this. But in 1994, crime bill increased prison funding. Congress passed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act in 1994. The act would allocate $9.7 billion to fund prisons. It also expanded the federal death penalty, addressing certain types of criminal behavior such as hate crimes and sex crimes, and increased mandatory minimum sentencing rules. Okay. Now, for the people in the chat room watching in the chat, who do you think, now gonna give you a hint, it wasn't Bill Clinton, but who do you think this notorious crime bill in the 1990s was spearheaded by? Who do you think was in charge of this big crime bill in the 90s that was in charge of Congress giving funds to state prisons to stricken their laws? Okay, so the Violent Crime Control Act, pretty much saying we are going to pay you. Dylan, you got it. Joe Biden. This, also known as Biden's Law, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, would give federal funds to state prisons to have stricter prison laws. Okay, and this was spearheaded by Joe Biden. It was signed. Okay, Bill Clinton was a part of that with the 3 strikes and all that. But crime bill Joe Biden, and he was so proud of it at the time too. But crime bill Joe Biden was the one who spearheaded that. Okay, now listen to this. In 1996, Congress denies welfare benefits to people of drug felonies, to people with drug felonies. So that means if you were addicted to drugs and you went to prison for being addicted to drugs, when you got out of prison, you couldn't get government assistance. Okay? Excuse me. Congress passed major welfare reform legislation in 1996. The Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Recreational Act would deny federal benefits such as welfare and food assistance to people who have been convicted of felony drug offenses, making their re-entry from prison to society increasingly challenging per sentencing program. Okay. This mainly affected black people. This primarily affected black people. Somebody, as I'm scrolling down, somebody says, he was so proud of it, he called it Biden's Law. Exactly. He called it Biden's Law. That was one of his most prideful moments in his entire career as a politician. His most prideful moments was the Biden's Law, the crime bill in the 90s. Okay. Funny how they switched up with the meth epidemic. Exactly. Now, with this, they skyrocket. With this, okay, they're locking black people up. Crazy. The incarceration. Now, they're not saying the racial disparities in the incarceration, but this is pretty much black people damn near exclusively. Okay. So, black people getting locked up, the incarceration rates are skyrocketing for black people. Okay, the incarceration rates, there are more black people incarcerated under these modern incarceration rates for drug offenses than they were during the black laws. Okay, so black people, they're like, well, drugs, the war on drugs, we got to be strict on drugs, we got to lock people up for doing drugs, we have to make crime bills allocating almost $10 billion of federal money that you pay for. That's the state, okay, taxes that you pay for. We're going to use that, and we're going to give that to prisons to lock you up, to make the prison laws stricter on you, because we can't increase them ourselves with the state laws, because they have their own laws. So we're just going to incentivize them to lock your black guys up even longer with the taxes that you pay us with. Okay, but with the meth epidemic, then it's a public health crisis that needs rehabilitation and therapy, and we're just going to create facilities and we're going to give them clean needles to do the drugs so they won't get AIDS sticking these dirty needles in their arms. So we're going to allow them to do meth safer. We're not going to stigmatize the meth and opioids like we stigmatize crack cocaine, because we weren't really trying to stigmatize crack cocaine. We were trying to stigmatize black people, the black community in general. That's what we're trying to do, but we did that under the guise of this is attacking crack, this is attacking drugs. But we have a complete 180 a policy, 180 view on how we're viewing drugs if it's done by their white counterparts. Okay, so this stuff, a lot of this stuff is not, the rest of the stuff is not really too much relevant. To the topic at hand. Hold on. Get this. Hold on. Taking this charger out of here. Put the charger in here real quick. We got to put my charger in. I appreciate everybody who's watching, everybody who's liking, everybody who's subscribed. If you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe. I greatly appreciate that. Please like and share, and you can follow me on my social media at J_Elite10. Okay, so let's continue. Now I'm just gonna look up a few key facts with this, since they want to talk about hold on, there was something else before I skip past this. Scroll through. Oh, okay, this one. Okay, something I wanted to say right before we move on to the next thing. I want you to look at this and look at the way they're wording this. This is very important to note. Very important to note, right? This is in 2010. 2010. This was when Obama was in charge. Okay. Federal government enacts a Fair Sentencing Act. The Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 rise the amount of crack cocaine for a drug offense to trigger minimum 5 to 10. It says mandatory 5 and 10-year minimum sentences. This was designed to reduce disparities in sentencing people of different races, which had previously resulted in thousands of Latino and Black Americans receiving longer prison sentences for drug crimes with relatively small quantities of crack cocaine, according to the Bernin Center of Justice. But why I went back to this is I want you guys to pay attention to what they did here. They said Latino and Black Americans. Okay, I highlighted that. Okay, that's important that they did that. They did not do that by accident. So it's going from people of color, which pretty much back during the day that only applied to black people, people of color. Then they wiggled in the black and brown. Now you're starting to see they're going to watch. This is not the first time you're going to notice this. They're going to start trying to flip the black and brown, which we already know is not a thing, that does not exist. Black and brown does not exist. We know that. But they're going to try to flip the black and brown, and they're going to say brown and black. Notice how these disproportionate sentencing and the crack epidemic and all that stuff affected black people damn near exclusively. Okay, it affected Latinos too, to a smaller degree, much smaller degree, and we're going to get into that. But notice how they put Latino first. They said Latino and Black Americans. Pay attention to that. That's probably, they're going to try to start doing that. They're going to try to start doing that. Okay. Get ready to move to the next thing. Okay, this is a just some key facts. So because I noticed that. So now let's bring up the disparities, the racial disparities, because there are some racial disparities between Latinos and Caucasians, and Black people, but there's not really a common thing between Black people and Latinos, like they like to make it seem. They like to make it seem like Black people and Latinos share damn near identical disparities in prisons. Okay, so we're going to look up some facts to disprove that. Okay. Now this is according to sentencingproject.org. So you know where I'm getting this information from. Black Americans are incarcerated at a state prison at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. That means for every, damn near for every 1 white person goes to jail, 5 black people go to jail. And primarily men. For every 1 man, for every 1 white male is 5 black males. Okay? Okay? Nationally, 1 in 81 black adults in the U.S. is receiving time in state prisons. Wisconsin leads the nation in black imprisonment rates. For every 36 black Wisconsinese, I believe that, like, you know how they Chicagoans, you know, New Yorkers. I guess this is like Wisconsin teens, like residents of Wisconsin, is in prison. For every one of every 36 black Wisconsinese is in prison. That's a very high rate, okay, in Wisconsin. In 12 states, right here at 3, in 12 states, more than half the prison population is black, okay. Alabama, now remember, we said Alabama was the last state to end convict leasing. Alabama, Delaware, Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, Mississippi, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. Okay. Now notice a lot of these states are South states. A lot of these states were with the Confederacy. A lot of them were. I think Maryland, I think that state was I believe neutral. I believe that state was neutral. Maryland and Michigan, I believe, they were neutral. All these other states, except Illinois. Illinois was with Union. I know that. All these other states, California, no, South California, North California, they were with the Confederacy as well. Not much has changed. Not much has changed. So we're on to 4. 7 states maintain a black-white disparity larger than 9-to-1. 9-to-1. Okay. California, Connecticut, Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Wisconsin. Now remember, we're saying California. Did I say California here? I meant Carolina. California. Remember, we're saying that New Jersey as well. For them who thinks now New Jersey is blue, is supposed to be Democrat. For those who think that the Democratic states are lighter on black people in imprisonment. Okay. Now, this is the point. Now, when they say Latinos and black people, look at this. Latinx, which means Latino men and Latino women, Latinx individuals are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate that is 1.3 times the incarceration rate of whites. Ethnic disparities in the highest highest in Massachusetts, which report an ethnic differential of 4.1 to 1. 4.1 to 1. Okay. Now, that's the highest. Okay. But on the average, it's 1.3. That's almost 1.5. Almost 1.5 in comparison to the white counterparts. But when we were up here, we're seeing blacks are incarcerated at state prisons nearly 5 times the rate of white people. So this is 1.3 for Hispanics, and this is 5 for black people. So this is the actual prison statistics and the actual prison numbers to show you that the black and brown disparities in the prison system is not nearly what they would imply that it is. Okay. Speed up a little bit. Okay. Now this is from news.gsu.ed. Okay, I'm gonna just read this one paragraph because I know I've been doing a lot of reading, so California, good point. California is also Democrat too. Okay. So, reading right here. The report, which and the font is a little light, so I'm trying to let me highlight it. So if you guys want to like pause and read yourself, you guys can do that as well. The report which this makes it easier for me too. The report which established the Council on Criminal Justice, a nonpartisan think tank. Nonpartisan means neither Democrat or Republican. They're like non-biased. They're not on the Democratic or the liberal side, or they're not on the conservative or Republican side. That's what nonpartisan think tanks is. Okay. Explained how disparities in state imprisonment rates changed between 2000 and 2016. During the 16-year period, the ratio of blacks to whites in state prisons fell more than 8 to 1 to 5 to 1. Now we just explained that was 5 to 1. 8 to 1. That means for every one white male that went to prison, damn near 8 black men went to prison. 8 to 1. And it dropped from 5 to 1. We're still more than twice as likely to go to prison now. And it took 16 years. And within 16 years, it dropped from 8 to 1 to 5 to 1. Okay. The ratio of Hispanics dropped, the Hispanics to white dropped from a little more than 2 to 1 to nearly 1 to 1. Okay. So we saw in the other statistic is 1.3. That's nearly 1 to 1. So nearly for every one white male is one Hispanic male. But it was before in 2000, it was pretty much for every one white male, it was 2 Hispanic for every. Let me move this out the way so you guys can actually see. For every one white male, it was 2 Hispanic males. Okay. And it was 8 black males going to prison. Let me do that one more time, just so you guys can like really get this visual. For every one white male, it was 2 Hispanic males and 8 black males. Okay. And it dropped from now it's for every one white male, it's damn near 1 Hispanic male and 5 black males. Now, that is to clear up the narrative of this black and brown disproportionate prison. Nothing. We got to stop that black and brown stuff. We have to stop that because they're trying to flip it to a brown and black. I swear, if we keep letting this we have to nip that in the bud every single time we hear it. Anytime we hear anybody making a racial comparison, anytime we hear, and I just made my last live was about comparing the struggles. Anytime we hear anybody make a comparison between the oppression that black people go through and the oppression that anybody else go through, we have to nip that in the bud right then and there, because eventually, if we keep letting this go on, they will eventually start to try to push the narrative that Hispanics have it worse than black people. They will start to try to push that narrative. Okay. It's a really hard narrative to push because it's false. It's a lie. But they will attempt it. Okay. So, most people, now all of these thousands and thousands and thousands of people are locked up. Now, I got some statistics right here for you guys. A lot of these people, now these are the state prisons. Most people, like I said in the beginning of the live, most people are locked up in state prisons. State prisons, local prisons, and federal prisons. Okay? Now, as you can see, read a little bit right here. 74% of people held in jail are not convicted of any crime. That means a lot of these people are held in jail and they don't have the money to make bond, or they're denied bond. So they haven't been convicted of whatever crime. They're just denied bond, so they're stuck in jail. A lot of this applies to black people. Okay? Now, this is on the federal level. Despite reform, drug offenses are still the defining characteristic of federal system. This is the drugs. These are the amount of people who are locked up for drugs. And this is the violent crime. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it a little better. These are the drugs. This is property crime. This is violent crime, public order, like, disturbing the peace and whatnot. And, all these other weapons charges, still drugs right here. So you can combine this with this. Look how big that is. And the drugs right here. Most of them locked up because of drugs in federal prison because of drugs. Okay. So this is to show most people right here locked up because of drugs. Let me see if I can show you some more statistics that are relevant. I want to show statistics that are relevant to. Now, when we were talking about bail, right? This is why so many are denied bail before the trial. They're not wealthy enough to afford the bail money, okay? Minimum bail amount is $1,000. It's $10,000. Now, you only have to pay pretty much $1,000 of that, okay? Now, annual income of, let me see, what was that word saying? Detained pre-trial annual income is this much, and they damn near only making bail. This is damn near their annual income right here. Okay. So, and white people make more money and have more access to bail than black people do. Okay. 1 in 5 incarcerated people are locked up for drug offenses. Okay. This is the state. This is local and this is federal. 1 in 5. Most people are locked up because of drug offenses. Okay. Now, let's go on to drug offenses, right? Who does the drugs? Who does the drugs? Let's be real with it. Okay? And this is relevant. This happened just last year. This was a statistic just last year, which was like a few days ago. Last year was a few days ago, I mean. In 2021, analysts of marijuana-related arrests in 2020 in New York City's 5 boroughs reported that people of color, black people, just scratch that out and put black people, comprise 94% of those arrested. Black people and sprinkle in a little bit of Hispanics. Okay. We just went over prison statistics about black people and Hispanics. So we're not going to play this people of color like every non-black person is in the same boat, because that's not the truth. Okay. In 2021, analysts from Milwaukee County, Wisconsin District Attorney's File report that black Wisconsinese Wisconsinese, I believe, were 4.3 times more likely than their white counterparts to be convicted for having marijuana. We were 4.3 times more likely in Wisconsin to be convicted for marijuana. The worst disparity in Wisconsin in the Oswego County, where black people are listen to this. Black people are 33.9 times more likely to be arrested, and this place, Minnetonka County, where black people are 29.9 times more likely to be arrested than white people, of course. Okay. In a 2021 analysis by American Civil Liberties Union concluded black people are 3.64 times more likely than white people to have been arrested for marijuana possession, notwithstanding comparable usage rates. Okay, that means black people and white people pretty much use marijuana at the same rates, but black people are 3.64 times more likely to be convicted for it. Okay. Authors reported in every single state, black people are more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession. And in some states, black people are up to 6, 8, and almost 10 times more likely to be arrested. Almost 10 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana, even though black people and white people have similar marijuana usage rates. Okay. In 31 states, racial disparities were actually larger in 2018 than in 2010. Okay. Okay. Interesting to note. Who was the president at that time? From 2010 to 2018. That was Obama. Okay. That was Obama. He got elected. He first got elected in 2008. Okay. So this is damn near Obama's entire term where racial disparities between marijuana imprisonment increased. Okay, because his term ended in 2016. So this is damn near minus 2 years his entire term. Well, I would technically, yeah. Minus 2 years. Yep. So, but what? Okay, some people might be asking why though. Why do you want to send people to prison? What is the benefit of that? Okay. Let me read some of this. Some of your comments. There goes that water. Okay. Overly police and given harsher sentences. Yep. It says I got some BS and the criminal wrote hella papers on this. Yeah. Federal prisons are cruisy compared to state prisons. Exactly. State prisons are far worse than federal prisons. Okay. I wonder what the racial makeup of this institute of those institutions. Exactly. Most people are locked up now. When Joe Biden was defending his crime bill, he was saying, remember that interview he had with Charlemagne where he said that if you don't vote for me, you're not black. Remember he said that if you have like an issue voting for me between me and Trump, then you're not really black. Remember him saying that? In that same conversation, when Charlemagne brought up the crime bill, he pointed that out. He was all like, oh, well, people are saying the crime bill, my crime bill skyrocketed incarceration. But most people are incarcerated in state prisons. Okay, so he put it off on the state prison when his crime bill incentivized and gave money to state prisons to make the state prisons stricter than the state prisons really were. Okay, So the state prisons are very, very strict, thanks to Joe Biden, because he gave them money for that. Now, it's pronounced Wisconsinites. Okay, Wisconsinites. Thank you. Thank you. Let me see. Now, let's look at this. Why would you want to lock so many people up like that? We're almost done with all the articles and stuff like that. Then I'm gonna spit some game for y'all real quick. Following the money of mass incarceration. Remember, following the money. So we're gonna read a little bit of this. We're not gonna read the entire thing, but we're gonna read a little bit of this. The cost of imprisonment, including who benefits and who pays, is a major part of the national discussion around criminal justice policy. But prisons and jails are not just one piece of the criminal justice system, and the amount of media and policy attention that the various players get is not necessarily proportional to their influence. Okay, we're right here. In the first of its kind report, we found that the system of mass incarceration cost the government and families of justice-involved people at least 182 billion each year in this report. 182 billion. Okay. Now, we provide a significant cost of the global unprecedented system of mass incarceration and over-criminalization. We give relevant, important, and various parts. We highlight some of the under-discussed yet costly parts of the system, and then we share all of the resources so the journalists and advocates can build upon our work. Now, following the money. All of these things add up into mass incarceration. All of these things they get money from. Public correctional agencies, 80.7 billion. Judicial and legal, okay, criminal law only, almost 30 billion, 29 billion. Okay. Policing, 63.2 billion. All of these things, all annual to 182 billion. Now, the fine print right here. Except for private prison profits, this graph only includes the cost of more than 1 billion a year. All figures are based on the most recent available information. Okay. Let me see if there's some of that. Okay. I'm going to read these points right here, starting from here. The criminal justice system is overwhelmingly a public system with private prison companies acting. Now, private prisons, pretty much, that's damn near convict leasing. We explained what convict leasing was earlier before. So if you guys want to go back, we already know what convict leasing is. That's damn near what private prisons are. Okay. Acting only as extensions of public system. The government's payroll for correctional employees is over 100 times than private prisons industry profits. Okay, despite the fact that the Constitution requires counsel to be appointed for the defendants unable to afford legal representation, that's the right to an attorney. The system only spends 4.5 billion on this right. Okay. And over the last decade, states have been reducing this figure even as case loads have grown. So the cases were okay. Let me take this off real quick to explain something to you guys. Most people who are in jail, they haven't actually gone to trial. Most cases don't actually go to trial. It would completely destroy the the justice system, the order that the justice system has now, if most of the cases actually went to trial. The thing is, most of the cases actually do not go to trial. Most of the time, their settlements. People take the plea bargain, okay? And a lot of times, especially with black people who don't get the money because we haven't gotten our reparations yet, when we get caught up for crimes that we don't commit a lot of times, we get caught up and we deserve equal legal representation that the white counterparts don't get. Our representation are underfunded. The free representation that we get, because we do get it because of a constitutional right, we do get that. But a lot of those times, the free representation, our free attorneys, are underfunded. So they really don't. First off, a lot of them are racist, but the ones that are, they get underfunded. So they really don't care. We get kind of like the bottom of the barrel lawyers. And a lot of the time, they just convince you to take the deal. So with the 4.5, now out of the annual money that they make, 182 billion, only about 5 of that goes to the legal representation that is a constitutional right for us to get. And that number is being reduced despite the fact that there are more cases going to trial. More people are denying taking the plea bargain, and they're actually going to trial. But the legal representation that the federal government gives to different states and state government and stuff like that, they're actually reducing the amount that lawyers are actually getting. So that's so you know what that is. Okay. So, as we continue. Private companies that supply goods. Now, this is important. This is important. Private companies that supply goods to prisons, to prison commissary, or promote telephone services for correctional facilities bring in almost as much, 2.9 billion, as governments pay private companies, 3.9 billion to operate private prisons. Okay, so I want you to think of how much money. Let me take this off. I want you to think of how much money, like the foods and stuff like that, they have to ship to the prisons. They would have to ship that to the prisons. Think of how much money they would have to get. Think of how much money the telephone service, because people, they're in prison, they have to make calls to their family. So they would call their family. Think of how much money the telephone services they make off of working with the prisons. All of these things make money off of the prisons. Okay, there's a big incentive to keep people in prison, because prisons, mass incarceration, makes a lot of money. Okay. Now we're right here. Feeding and providing health care for 2.3 million people, a population larger than about 15 states, is expensive. Okay. So a lot of people are making money. Okay, now we're going to go down here. We're just going to read this last bit. Okay. Bail bond companies collect over 1.4 billion non-refundable fees from defendants and their families. The industry also actively works to block reforms that threaten its profits. Okay, even if reforms could prevent people from being detained in jail because of their poverty. Excuse me, I had an itch, I had to scratch it. Okay, so the bail bonds want people to go to jail because them and their family, they pay bails. So they could, and it's non-refundable. Once you pay your bail, it's non-refundable. So they make 1.4 billion off of that. And now I believe this is about annually. I believe all of this stuff is annually. Okay. Specialized phone companies that win monopoly contracts that charge families up to this. I hope you guys can see it. $24.95 for a 15-minute phone call. So that means phone companies are making hella money off of prisons. Bail companies are making hella money off of prisons. You still have to have you know, the like the laundry service to get the clothes washed and stuff like that. All of these industries, all of these things are making hella money off of prisons. They're making so much money. You combine all of that stuff up together, that's $1.8 billion annually. Okay. Now right here, commissary vendors that sell goods to prison. Now, you know how you see prisons, sometimes they have their ramen noodles, sometimes they have peanut butter or stuff like that, right? You know, deodorant, all that stuff. They sell stuff to prisons. They sell stuff to incarcerated people in prisons, okay, who rely largely off of the money sent by their loved ones. So if you have people getting money from their families, their brothers, their sisters, husbands, their wives mostly, even though women go to prison, but men go to prison far more than women do, they send their family members money, and they use that money to buy, you know, toothbrush, toothpaste, you know, toiletries. Sometimes they buy snacks, sometimes they buy food, you know, ramen noodles, stuff like that, common stuff you see in the prisons, right? They make they make 1.6 billion a year off of that. The commissary vendors make that much money off of that. So it's incentivized for a lot of people that they would want to keep prisons around. And most of the people in prison, as I've just shown you guys, are black people. And they're in prison for non-violent drug offenses. The drug offenses that were a big crime, they were a big crime back in the day. Okay, now they're a public health. They're public health. It's a public health crisis. Okay. Let me read some of your comments. Yeah, everything costs more in jail too. The chips, the soda, the candy, everything. It's like, I'm sure a lot of you guys have. You guys go to like an airport or like a museum or even a movie theater, and you know the box of candy. You go to the grocery store. The box of candy at a movie theater, you pay $1 for a box of candy, maybe $2 for a box of candy, or a candy bar or whatever. At the airport, you're paying $5 for the same box. For the same box, you're paying $5. This bottle of water, you can get this at like a gas station. You can get this at a grocery store. You can get this for like sometimes even less than $1 for a bottle of water. Okay, you go to an airport, you go to a museum or something, you would pay like $4 for a bottle of water. For the same bottle of water, nothing special about it, but you pay 4 times as much. That's what they would do in the prisons. Okay, so this bottle would cost like $1. If I could go to any gas station and buy a bottle of water for like $1 or so. Okay, in prison they would be charged like $4 or $5, $4 or $5 depending. And this is me kind of lowballing. Okay, you would have chips, Doritos, Snickers, and you know, cookies and all that stuff. That stuff is 3 or 4 times higher in prison. And these people, they can't get it from anywhere else. They can't go to the store and buy anything. So they kind of have no other choice but to pay $5 for a Snickers bar. You would look at $5. You would, anywhere you go, you see $5 for a Snickers bar. You're like, that's ridiculous. I would never buy that. I would never pay $5 for one individual, just a regular Snickers bar. I would never pay that much for that. But they have to. And these vendors who sell these Snickers bars for $5 or sell the chips and sell the candy for 3 or 4 times as much make $1 billion, make over $1 billion, close to $2 billion annually off of that alone. All of these entities making billions of dollars off of mass incarceration, black mass incarceration. Okay. This stuff is evil. This stuff is terrible. And then when you get out, because of the clause, let me see. Let me actually look that up, because I want you guys to see the visual of it. I'm pretty sure you guys know. Let me look this up for you guys real quick. Okay. Right here. Do it like this. This is the 13th Amendment. Okay. United States Constitution. Okay. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except highlight, except as a punishment for crime. Oh, wait, hold on. Except as a punishment for crime, wherefore the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place subject to its jurisdiction. Okay? This is the clause that none of the politicians wants to talk about, neither the left or the right, okay? Except as a punishment for a crime, wherefore the party shall have been duly convicted. And how many black people are falsely convicted? Let's be honest. They say duly convicted. Just because you're convicted actually doesn't mean you actually did it. So a lot of black people are convicted for crimes that they didn't do. And then when they get out of prison, they lose their rights. The little bit of rights that they did have, they lose their rights. So you can't vote. You can't apply for certain loans. You can't apply for, certain stuff. You can't do certain things. Their jobs is going to deny you, especially you as a black person, going to deny you because you have a conviction, because you've been convicted. So the recidivism rate continues. Let me see. And prisons keep making more money and more money and more money off of you going back to jail. And stuff is evil, man. It started with slavery, and it still continues. They were making pretty much free labor. Now in prison, what they'll do in prison is they'll say, okay, we can't technically force you to work. Like, we can't like beat you with a whip if you don't work. And in prison, they do have prison labor in prison. And this is in modern prison today, where they'll have you making like license plates. Sometimes they'll have you even being customer support. Honestly, you can look that up yourself. They'll have prisoners, inmates being customer support. Okay. They'll have you doing that stuff. In California, shout out to Kamala Harris for this. In California, they extended people's prison sentences because they needed the inmates to be firefighters, and sometimes they'll have inmates actually being firefighters, fighting fires. When the California, when the California were having all those wildfires and stuff like that, they were having California prison inmates act as firefighters to put out the fires and save the homes of those rich white folk. Okay? So there's still prison labor. You're still working in the prison. Okay? And if you don't do it, if you say, you know what, I'm not going to do it, you can't make me do it, I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to do my time, you can't make me work for you, they will deny you parole. You can be denied parole for not working for the prison. And the amount of money you work for, you literally work for cents you literally work for cents. And when I'm saying cents, I mean you're working for like 12 to 15 cents in some of these prisons, depending on what state you're in. You're working for literal pennies. You have people working their asses off for less than a quarter an hour. Okay? So this stuff, I mean, it really is the new plantation, is the new slavery. Slavery never ended. Even according, when they say slavery ended, according to the Constitution, up-to-date Constitution, slavery is still alive. Okay? According to the Constitution, they made an exception for people who are convicted, that they are still slaves. Okay? Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude can exist in the United States with the exception of crime and punishment. That is in the Constitution today. So, the situation is really messed up. We have to be knowledgeable about this stuff if we're going to fix this stuff. We have to be knowledgeable about that. And a lot of the reason, and this is going to be just one part, because I can't break everything. Don't click that link, y'all. Don't click that link. Let me remove that very quickly. Okay. Your report. You gonna get out of here. Got you. Okay. Damn. That troll made me lose my train of thought. Let me think. What was that? I was just on a roll saying something. Okay. So, it'll come to me. The United States still legally has slavery. It's had it, and it has black men working as slaves. If you deny doing it, you will be denied parole. So if you're up for, let's say you're doing outrageous sentence, you're doing 40 years in jail. You don't want to be in prison for the whole 40 years. So you're going to work. If they're like, okay, well, you can be up for parole in about 15 years, 20 years. If you make these license plates, if you work on this road, if you work as a firefighter risking your life, if you do this, if you're customer service, if you do this, you can be up for parole. If you deny it, that's fine. That's cool. But you'll have to do the whole 40 years. So they do it a lot of the times. Okay. Okay. You said, I was saying how 13th Amendment took slavery from the plantation. Exactly. The 13th Amendment, because what they did is, and I'm going to have to break this down in another video because this is going to be too long, but nobody, the North nor the South, despite what you might have learned in school, none of them morally wanted to end slavery. Okay, there was an economic issue between the North and the South, which was pretty much the basis for it. Like, okay, that was the reason. Okay, there was an issue between the North and the South, the North states and the South states. Okay, that was the reason for the Civil War. That was the reason for the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, in the Emancipation Proclamation, which is what they claim freed the slaves, the Emancipation Proclamation, if you actually read it, doesn't outlaw slavery. It actually does not outlaw the concept of slavery in the United States. That was supposed to be the 13th Amendment. But with the 13th Amendment, they know, okay, this free labor that we've been benefiting from for centuries, we can't just give that up. So what we'll do is we'll say, we'll create a 13th Amendment that will free the slaves, but then we'll create a loophole that we can slide pretty much all black people under. We can just say, I'm white and I say so. So we convict you of this crime. You're convicted of this crime. You're convicted of this crime. You have stories after stories after stories of black people spending decades in jail for crimes they didn't commit. We'll create this loophole to make you slaves again. So technically we say, oh, well, we ended slavery, but if we want you to still be a slave, you can still be a slave. And then here come the black laws. Then here come convict leasing. Then here comes the prison industrial complex. It's just a modern slavery. That's really what it is. And when you get out, you're still a slave because you still don't have your rights as a citizen. When you're convicted of a felony, if you still have that felony on your record, you don't have your citizen rights. It's really messed up, man. It is really, really messed up. Let me see. But I appreciate everybody who's liked. I appreciate everybody who's subscribed. I appreciate everybody who's sharing. Everybody who's been here. I'm gonna have to go deeper into this type of subject on another broadcast coming up soon. But you guys stay safe. I'm glad to see you all popping back up in the chat. That means you guys are still here. So happy New Year to you guys. If you guys are watching this after the live, happy New Year to you all. I hope you all had a good New Year. I hope you all were safe. I hope you guys stay safe out there. But I have things I have to handle. So you all take care. You all stay safe, my brothers and sisters. I'll catch you guys later.